From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio.
Welcome back to the show. My name is Matt.
My name is Noel.
They call me Ben. We're joined, as always, with our super producer, Dylan the Tennessee Pal Fagan. Most importantly, you are here. That makes this the stuff they don't want you to know, with a returning special guest, Dr. Venkman here. If you are tuning in the evening our Strange News publishes, welcome to September 29th, the last Strange News of September 2025. We're coming back, and we wanted to open the show with a very old joke that we love that just came back into the zeitgeist. As I was saying, quoting Jimmy Kimmel here.
Joining our commentary already in progress from when we were rudely interrupted. Not us, but the royal we.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it only lasted a weekend and a day.
Mm-hmm. And it's still not a total reemergence or restitution because, as we know, the several of the syndication networks that control various outfits or regional distribution rights for Jimmy's show still have refused to air his broadcast. But he is officially back, despite the protestations of Sinclair. And Nexstar.
I found out, guys, where you live, you could have watched it live on ABC. Where I live, I was unable to watch it anywhere live. I was not allowed to.
Because you would have to do something crazy like go to the internet.
Well, on the internet, I would have to do something illegal to watch it, or to buy, I guess, Hulu Live plus Apple, Disney TV.
That's right. A lot of those services do have live TV streaming, almost like not like a VPN, but like where you can stream local television from other places.
Yeah, but right. I pay good money for Xfinity.
You're one of those, huh? Holy cow!
Just like with South Park,
right?
I was unable to watch it through the exorbitant fees I pay to a giant cable company.
And if anybody wants a regional map showing you the coverage of Sinclair, which goes against trust laws, by the way, the coverage of Sinclair and Nexstar, just write to us, conspiracy@iHeartRadio.com. We can send that map along your way. This shows, I was thinking of you, Matt, because this map shows how the Atlanta metro area isn't covered by those two behemoths, but your neck of the woods is.
Dude, I tuned in to the live ABC feed just online through Xfinity, and I was watching the news. You guys know how those late night TV shows usually come on like right after the news ends, and like with SNL, it'll cut from the news directly into SNL. Well, I sat there for a while going, what the hell is going on? And it was just more news. And I had to read to find out, they just extended out news coverage for an hour and a half.
Yeah, and it's always good to get the news, but it's always bad to have comedians be stifled, especially like Jimmy Kimmel is many things, but controversial is not necessarily one.
Well, I think we've talked about this. I mean, the comment itself didn't even raise an eyebrow in the general population in terms of like Google search results for Jimmy Kimmel when the actual comment happened. It wasn't until he was punished that people started searching for it. And I've seen a lot of folks talking about how they couldn't even quite figure out which one it was.
Right.
What he said. Because what he said was something to the effect of the Trump camp is trying to do as much as they can to prove that the killer wasn't one of their own, not accusing him of being one of their own, just saying that they were in a PR frenzy to make very clear that it was the opposition rather than one of their own. And that was apparently the nail in the coffin, but it wasn't actually him talking smack about Kirk himself, which is what makes this whole thing really scary.
The thing about escalating propaganda war is sometimes unexpectedly your escalator stops and then you talk trash about it at the United Nations.
Did you see the thing that
Yes.
allegedly the cameraman ran up there and turned the escalator off? The cameraman that was a part of the administration's
I hadn't
entourage?
heard that follow up. I
Yes.
saw the
Yeah, I
video.
saw
It
that
looked
this
like a
morning.
malfunction. What are you saying? Who's cameraman?
Well, guys, I may be completely off base here, but I heard some rumors launching around about how the teleprompter went out, and that was also something that was done purposefully to make it seem as though the UN is just out of sorts.
Right. The idea again of a narrative war, and I'm quite proud of that dumb escalator joke. So I hope, Dylan, we can keep it. The statements themselves, we were talking about this a little bit on our off-air group chat. The statements themselves made by the U.S. president are directly in line with earlier statements by folks like Vladimir Putin. Big fan of our show. Couldn't have written it better himself. And so what we're communicating here, of course, is a win for the late night show format. It's a win for the freedom of speech, the First Amendment, but it's not a complete win because, again, what we're describing here is common to so many people across the United States who might have said, oh, I thought Kimmel was back. Why can't I see it without giving another company more money or going R-matey on it? So we're with you. We know a lot of stuff happened in New York. We're recording on September 24th, so there are probably going to be updates to a lot of the things we talk about in tonight's Strange News. We're going to go all over the place. We've got some great hidden mysteries. We've got some weird AI updates that I really love, some public pranking, some scary stuff. But, guys, since we're talking a little bit about the UN meeting in New York, why don't we take a break for a word from our sponsors and start there? Oh, do we want to shout out Fat Bear Week first?
Well, it's Fat Bear Week. So
okay.
Coming anyway. Let's see. What do you need to know? Fat Bear Week 2025 starts on September 23rd, which is yesterday, actually, as we record this. And that's where fans are able to vote daily for the fattest brown bear, of which there are multiple candidates to choose from. So you can actually get in on the voting yourself. Just Google Fat Bear Week, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, we mentioned this last year as well. We're super into Fat Bear Week. I love how we kind of, as a group, we pick things that we get obsessed with. This has nothing to do with anything, but remember we were talking, I think a little off air, about falconry. Dylan and I are hoping to take a crew out for a day of falconry. And we have decided that we're going to start describing things that are not cool as non-falcon.
Non-falcon.
Are you guys interested?
It's so not Falcon or non-Falcon.
Yeah.
I'm with it, man. But yeah, vote for your favorite chunky boy over at explore.org/fat-bear-week.
And with that, we'll pause for a word from our sponsors, and then we'll return with some breaking news from New York City. And we have returned. All right, this is deep water, folks. The inboxes went crazy for us, I think, as individuals right before the news released. But the United States Secret Service has announced they dismantled what they call an imminent telecom or telecommunications threat in the New York tri-state area. Here's what's happening. If we rewind back to 2024, we see that there were a lot of reports of the private homes of would-be politicians or election officials getting swatted. And I think we all know what being swatted means, but do we want to describe it for the audience?
That's when somebody calls in a SWAT team on you, basically, right?
Yeah. Makes a false statement.
Yes,
to
something that will
911.
lead to such activity. Yes.
Yeah, any kind of fake crime report with the intention of, like, the people calling know that that crime did not occur. They're attempting to trigger massive law enforcement response. It's an escalation of the earlier prank of calling non-consensual pizza deliveries to an organization or person's house back in the days where you didn't have to pay in advance for the pizza.
Oh, yeah. But it's not like calling and saying something that would show one cruiser to show up, right? And knock on a door and be like, you okay? It's usually the crime that's stated there is something that requires a SWAT team.
Right, exactly. And this can be dangerous. They were targeting a lot of politicians, right? This has been ongoing for some time, including people outside of the tri-state area, folks like Georgia's own Marjorie Taylor Greene, a lot of Republican officials, Democratic officials as well. And right before the big meeting at the United Nations that had so many problems with teleprompters and escalators, the U.S. Secret Service announced that it had looked into the swatting stuff, and it had been looking into it for several months, and they ended up discovering something, at least per their statements, that they did not anticipate. More than 300 co-located SIM servers and 1,000 SIM cards across multiple sites, a conspiratorial hidden network that could do much more than carry out anonymous telephonic threats on a burner. These could make genuine telecom attacks. The big news here is that if this thing had not been discovered, it could have relatively easily disabled cell phone towers, creating denial of service attacks, DDoS, and then allowing potential bad faith actors, we're dancing around the terrorist, right, or organized crime, to communicate without the usual surveillance. This is, let's go to a statement from the director of the Secret Service, Sean Curran. Sean said, the potential for disruption to our country's telecommunications posed by this network of devices cannot be overstated. The U.S. Secret Service's protective mission is all about prevention. All right, fine. And this I said, all right, fine. He didn't say that. And this investigation makes it clear to potential bad actors that imminent threats to our protectees will be immediately investigated, tracked down, and dismantled. This is scary stuff. This is real Halloween stuff, or as we were talking about off air, Mr. Robot stuff. The devices that they have found, everything they think is linked so far, they're all concentrated within 35 miles of the United Nations General Assembly, the big Mickey Mouse Club for world leaders.
Maybe it's part of that. Maybe it's just something benign, and they're just trying to help all of the people operating at the UN have their burner phones.
Sure. Who doesn't have a burner phone? Nobody has to answer that. The Secret Service, we learned about something they had, a pretty newly minted section of the agency called the Advanced Threat Interdiction Unit, or ETIU. ETIU, Brute.
Yes, I was about to say, very good.
So they're conducting this investigation in kind of an Avengers team up with Homeland Security, the DOJ, the DNI, and of course local law enforcement like the New York Police Department. The official statement of the Secret Service, which you can find at secretservice.gov. That's where most of the news is pulling their info from. The primary source here continues to hammer home that this is an ongoing investigation, and they are not giving any details about who may have made this network. They're not giving any details about how long they think this network was active, and they're not giving any further detail. Like, they haven't named any individual that they're going to attempt to apprehend or prosecute.
Like, how the hell did they find it?
Well, collection methods are the secret sauce, right?
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things. I keep mentioning that I'm rewatching Mr. Robot, and then things in the news keep happening that are crazy reminiscent of something that would occur in that show or did occur in that show. And this is another one. Some apartment that has all this stuff in it, that has all of these capabilities, like that's just randomly there. But it feels so odd and so calculated.
Sure. Yeah. Especially, the disturbing part is we saw a tip of an iceberg. Now, because it's an ongoing investigation, the authorities, if they're competent, are not going to release much more information until they have things 5x5 and watertight. If you look at it different, like we were diving deep into this, and we want to thank all our fellow listeners and old associates who reached out about it. It may have been an existing underground cell network meant entirely to provide untraceable services for things like drugs, human trafficking, arranging hits, which means it may have been more of an avoidance measure rather than an offensive measure.
Yeah.
However, it had both of those capabilities per the Secret Service. You know what I mean? Just like, a hammer can hit a nail and it can hit a skull.
Oh, this would be a devilishly smart thing for an organized criminal syndicate to pull off. Like, really? I never would have thought of that.
Super affordable, too, by the way.
And I mean, could you argue, or might this enter into the rhetoric of domestic terrorism and politically motivated terror attacks?
Well, we have apparently begun to define terrorism as anybody the people in power do not care for. So, yes.
That's what yes. And I was trying to diplomatically say rhetoric, that for that reason. It does feel like this is the kind of thing that could get lumped in and used as a further justification for tightening certain measures against privacy.
And let me amend this, because when I'm saying the equipment involved is affordable, I mean it's affordable for a large organization. If you're Johnny Blue Jeans and you wake up one day in Brooklyn and you say, I want to get real weird with it, it would be a huge investment for you. And it would take a lot of time, it would take a lot of hardware, and it would take a lot of technological acumen, a lot of know-how. So our questions still become, what is the end motive? Cui bono, who benefits? As we always say, what is the return on investment for whoever ponied up the cheddar for this? It's right now, with the information we have in the public, it is a big leap to assume it is a terror attack. I would say it's not a big leap to speculate on the possibility of a criminal enterprise. It's definitely also not a big leap to speculate about a surveillance apparatus, because New York is full of really weird, really fascinating stuff that people have just accepted as normal. Things get normalized so quickly. It is weird that there's a gigantic windowless building in Manhattan. Shout out to the Long Lines building. That's weird.
Oh, yeah.
That's weirder than neckties, which are themselves a very strange thing.
Hey, and if you haven't seen Mr. Robot, that building makes an appearance as the place that is targeted initially for attack. Did you talk, Ben, about how many of these safe houses they found that had these networks in them?
Not the safe houses, but we did, Matt, talk about the equipment that has been recovered so far. Do you want to talk about the number of safe houses?
I just found it on the CNN article you linked to, Ben, at the bottom here. Mm-hmm. It's naming multiple places. Yes. I don't know how to say this. Armonk, New York, Greenwich, Connecticut, Queens, New York, right across the river in New Jersey, which I think is the one that I heard you mention, Ben. But they were circling New York City.
Right. Tri-state area. Yeah.
But it's crazy to imagine it if you're honing in on a target or if you're operating in an area, just the idea that you could be in all of those different places setting these things up. So it's not an individual place, right? And that's what in my mind, I was seeing some place where a bunch of servers were set up to run these things. But it is that. It's just in all of these different places.
Yeah, because there is photographic evidence released by Secret Service and law enforcement, but that information is relatively limited. I was trying to think of the best analogy for that, what you're describing, the encirclement, the telecom siege here. Yeah. And I would recommend looking at a map of U.S. military bases encircling the nation of Iran. That is another very clear thing. And what both of those cases show us is that there is likely not a single individual at play here. It is almost certainly impossible that one individual could have conspired in this way. It has to be a network. The question is, what is this group? Is this a foreign state-level actor or a foreign state-level actor through a proxy? Is this private criminal industry trying to just getting bigger and bigger for their britches? Did they get to a point with trafficking or drugs or racketeering when they said, oh, yeah, what if we need to just shut down the cell phones? And Vinny's like, I gotcha. We can shut down the cell phones. Maybe 15 minutes. That's when you make the call.
Yeah. It also says that they could have sent a text message like a secret text message to every single cell phone in the United States within 12 minutes of someone like taking the action, pushing the
pulling
button.
the switch. Yeah. Because it's a very limited time window. The thing about the infrastructure of the United States, the physical infrastructure, is incredibly vulnerable. We've explored that in the past, but because the telecom infrastructure is a more recent development, it is a little bit more girded against intrusion, which is why you would have that very cinematic, limited window of time. It feels like Hollywood writing when they know they only have 45 minutes out of an hour program for commercials, but they wouldn't be able to keep it down forever. And this has become red meat to a lot of politicos, a lot of pundits, because it's a scary thing. It's up there with a comparison we made earlier on this show, or Daily Zeitgeist, where you get the worst good news. An organization you have never heard of says, hey, we've done a decade-long study and we're lowering the amount of rat feces that will be allowed in cereal. Or they say, hey, we're an acronym or an initialism that you have never heard of. Your tax dollars pay for us, and we have, after intense research and a lot of hard work from our officials, we have finally prevented the massive hippo-driven murders in East St. Louis, Missouri.
What?
Yeah, you're like, oh, great, but also, how much rat feces have I eaten? How many people have died in East St. Louis because of these hippos? And they're like, well, less now in both cases, fewer.
Good.
Great.
Not nearly enough rat feces, if you ask me.
Finally, now I can sleep.
It would be for a microcosmic version of it. Imagine if one of our friends came to us and said, guys, it's been, we've been friends for 20 years, and I want to tell you, I'm off the Quaaludes. I just stopped doing Quaaludes. And then we look around and say, oh, great, but also,
Did you have like a secret cache of them that you were holding on to from the 70s?
We have so many questions, right?
Questions, yeah.
This is what these stories tell us. We're spending some time on this one because the questions that naturally follow from this story tell us there is much more to come. Please read the official statement of the Secret Service over at their website. You can find some breaking news summaries of this from regional journalistic outfits, Fox 5 New York. They're all over YouTube. Check that one out. I'd also like to recommend the AP News article that published just yesterday before we recorded. Shout out to journalist Mike Balsamo. A massive telecom threat was stopped right as world leaders gathered at UN headquarters in New York. And that is where I get to the suspicious timing. It's right before this happened. It was a months-long investigation, right, that started with swatting and then began uncovering these individual nodes of a network. So with that in mind, I got to ask you guys about the timing. Does the timing and the timing of the public announcement, does it not feel a little hinky, as our pal Chuck would say?
Yeah. I'm trying to think of what it would be distracting from. It's
what wouldn't it be distracting from?
There's just so much going on right now that is that, right?
Or what the motivation would be. I mean, these are wheels within wheels, right? Hands in hands and gloves in gloves. This is Matryoshka doll for sure. And we have to be careful not to spin out our if-thens too extravagantly, because, there's a world where we could say, and I know for a fact that foreign governments have internally been thinking about this. There's a world where you could say, hey, the United States government exposed and found this thing to make us feel safer so that we didn't think about whatever thing they're doing. You know what I mean? Like the kid who lets their parents find a cigarette butt and says, yeah, I'm smoking, so that the parents don't know they're actually smoking weed, that kind of thing. It gets very conspiratorial and paranoid very quickly, but anybody who is acquainted with this milieu, we'd love to hear from you. There are so many stories we're not going to have time to get to right now. We do want to acknowledge that we know the news about Errol Musk. We are just going to mention it. The answer's out there. There's a phenomenal and phenomenally disturbing New York Times investigation about this. At the very end of this show, we'll warn you about squirrels. There's a PSA you need to hear. Someone did a great con, an unsuccessful con, trying to steal Graceland. All of that and more. But for now, we're going to pause for a word from our sponsors, and we'll be back with more strange news.
And we've returned. Ben, was looking more at this Mobile X company that was at the heart of, the story you just talked about, that offers those $10 SIM cards that you can buy at Walmart and other places.
Mm-hmm. This is why I'm excited to do an episode on this one.
Dude. Oh yeah, for sure. I don't want to spoil too much. Is their CEO, Mobile X's CEO and founder, Peter Adderton, just had a really interesting quote here that I'd just like to read real fast. He says, quote, "Our platform is designed to be easy to use and cost effective, qualities that can unfortunately also attract occasional bad actors."
Mm-hmm. The hammer company CEO says, well, we make good hammers.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's interesting to think about industries and organizations that produce goods that are known to be used by bad actors, right? You know it when you're making a SIM card that's that cheap that, you can go pick up at Walmart and then switch out, hot swap with whichever one you've got in your phone, that somebody's going to be using that for probably not great reasons. Unless, of course, it's just, someone trying to gain access to a little phone time and they don't have their Verizon account anymore. Or they can't, they can't afford the exorbitant prices that are offered other places.
Yeah, there are good use cases too. That's why we rationalize this stuff. Yeah. You know what I mean? A hammer can build a house, right? Or a person who needs access to what is called a burner phone may be in a situation in the US or abroad where they don't have the right documentation to get a phone, or a regular phone, even if they can afford to do so.
Yep. Well, and we find ourselves, all of us, if we are American citizens, and actually anybody, citizen of any country that's looking to get news out of the United States, find ourselves in the situation where we like to know what's going on, and we have this thing called the free press that is supposed to be able to have access to most things, especially things that the government does, as this is a representative democracy. So when you see things, pieces of news coming out of AP News, like Pentagon steps up media restrictions, now requiring approval before reporting even unclassified information, you start to worry a little bit. You think, that's kind of strange. And guys, it got me thinking back to that old film, Good Morning Vietnam, and to that scene where Airman Second Class Adrian Cronauer, whose job it is to disseminate the news to all of the U.S. servicemen out there operating in Saigon, Ho Chi Minh City, and that's his job, report the news. But before he can report anything to anyone, he has to get that news approved. And we talked on the show several times about that film and about that process and what it means to disseminate official information while you're in a war zone. We've talked about the rationalizations for that and maybe the need for some of that control of information. But when you're talking about unclassified information that's coming out from the Pentagon about what the Pentagon is doing, about what the United States military and government is doing, it seems like we should know about that. Again, because, we kind of pay for the whole thing and we supposedly run the whole thing, we, the people. So it's just a bit strange when you hear something like that coming out of the Pentagon. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah. I would say, well, an unnamed source familiar with the investigation would say, yeah.
Well, yeah, but so let's say you're working for Reuters and you put out something like that. Now it appears that person won't be allowed in the Pentagon again. It appears that person won't be allowed any information. So then they would have to have a mole inside the Pentagon that leaks information out, that then leaks it out.
And that strategy exists only for a limited amount of time, because history teaches us the next inevitable step is going to be clamping down on those journalists. As such that you could be, I mean, we're not there yet, but there is a world in which reporting unapproved news becomes so Orwellian, you could be jammed up for treason or anti-American activities. And I think it'll probably start with something like something like a defamation or libel or slander law that gets broadly emphasized, similar to the UK stuff with the protesters over at the Epstein thing. Oh, and by the way, did you guys see the statue of the current U.S.
Friends for
president
life.
and Jeffrey Epstein?
Yeah,
over
holding
on the
hands,
mall?
making the little heart hands on the plaque. It's pretty solid. Yeah.
Secret handshake.
That's still free speech, but it's also exacerbating the moves to clamp down on the free press.
Well, and also
I'm a
means
fan of the free press.
Yeah, it's a good thing for sure. It's in the Constitution too. But like, what is it? So many of these lawsuits that the president is putting forth seem, and now some of the direct instruction that he's giving to his Department of Justice to like go after dissenters, go after political adversaries,
Perceived enemies.
Right.
Is the way I would put it.
100%.
Guys, yeah, it's that stuff's insane. We talked about access to the White House, right? And the press credentials,
club. Yeah.
the press club, and all of the people that will be shifting in and out of that, that group, and just how that's again a method of controlling information, and you could use it that way if you wanted to. Like you're in, but none of you are allowed inside the room.
Oh, did I mention this real quick? I when the news broke that they were going to allow some podcasters in, I applied for press club credentials under the current administration. They haven't gotten back to me, so I'll go ahead and re-ping. Make sure it didn't go to their spam box.
Good luck
call.
to you,
Indeed.
sir. Let's jump back to this story from AP News, written by Morgan Lee. It was published on September 20th, 2025. Here it goes. The Pentagon says it will require credentialed journalists at the military headquarters to sign a pledge to refrain from reporting information that has not been authorized for release, including unclassified information. Journalists who don't abide by the policy risk losing credentials that provide access to the Pentagon under a 17-page memo distributed last Friday, as we're recording this on Wednesday, September 24th, that steps up media restrictions imposed by the current administration. And then if you look down to something that was written on X by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, it gives you a sense of why it's being done. And then we'll talk about this statement. Quote, "The press does not run the Pentagon. The people do. The press is no longer allowed to roam the halls of a secure facility. Wear a badge and follow the rules or go home."
Okay. AKA have your credentials revoked.
Yeah, so let's talk about what the press is. The press is supposed to be the people. It's supposed to be the people's arm of the government, right? A little bit,
but
in a way.
But a lot of the rhetoric that's getting thrown around is that they're not serving the interests of the people.
Right.
And therefore, like a lot of this FCC stuff, your license is at risk because you're no longer serving the needs of your community as dictated by who, right?
Yeah. It does not bode well, gentlemen.
Does not bode well, gentlefolk. Yes, agreed. This is the issue. So here's why it's quite clever and quite purposeful for the Pentagon to release this as a directive rather than as a law. There is no criminal punishment. The consequence, or no criminal punishment explicitly outlined in the memo. The consequence is the revocation of credentials. And the Hegseth statement is itself a bit misleading because it's saying wear a badge, which you always have to do if you go to the Pentagon, by the way, now the second largest office building in the world. But the wearing the badge thing, yes, you shouldn't be an extraneous person in that kind of hall of power. But the idea of following the rules so vaguely put does not acknowledge that the rules get changed, right? It does not acknowledge that the rules have just been massively altered. So it also doesn't acknowledge what the specific channels of approval would be. There are a lot of factions in the Pentagon. So one guy may say, this is great. Please tell the American public, run to the New York Times. Dude, get on the train and get back to the office and publish this today. And another person will say, well, I didn't authorize that. I don't want people talking about it. So what happens to the journalist then?
Well, and can we also just say that, deplatforming certain individuals on the right by forces on the left, when it comes to like Twitter and some big names losing their Twitter accounts, the president included, that's a slippery slope too. Oh,
absolutely.
There's absolutely both sides to blame. And it seems like neither one of the quote unquote sides are working in the best interest of free speech.
Right, because we're talking about private corporations. We're talking about the high levels of government that we can argue the private corporations, especially in social media channels, due to various types of legislation here in the States, they don't have the same personal liability. They build the hammer. And it's not on them if someone uses the hammer for evil. And I'm staying with this hammer comparison because it's working surprisingly well. The issue on the other side, to your point there, of a government entity that has protection of the press enshrined within its DNA is that they, by their own account, hold an historic responsibility to allow the news to be reported, even if they don't like it. Now, we know Uncle Sam has gone back and forth on this over the years. The various intelligence branches of the U.S., as well as parts of the Defense Department, do have their fingers in journalistic pies and have for a long time. They write to editorial boards and say, hey, don't tell a story or tell it this way. I think one of the most famous examples for us, of course, is in the wake of the JFK assassination, when the FBI reached out to every newspaper of note, even the rags, and said, here's what happened. This is the official thing. A lot of people are going to come to you, maybe journalists with their own pitches, and you need to dismiss this specifically as a conspiracy theory. So the U.S. has always had a level of influence and control over the press that is not reflected in the Constitution.
Bit of a toe the line mentality when it comes to certain extenuating circumstances that seem to trump those rights as they exist.
Call them 9/11 truthers. That'll do it. I want to leave this section here with a couple more quotes. This one from the Society of Professional Journalists. Here we go. This policy reeks of prior restraint, the most egregious violation of press freedom under the First Amendment, and is a dangerous step towards government censorship.
Well, we also know about the concept of catch and kill, right? Which is a form of prior restraint, but that also is sort of like a quid pro quo thing where sometimes there's a strong arm aspect to it. Sometimes it's like you do a solid for me, get rid of the story, and I'll help you out with a source or something. Didn't mean to interrupt, but that's totally what my mind goes towards.
Oh, yeah. And that quote does continue on. You can find it on the AP article, but here's one last one from Matt Murray, the executive editor at the Washington Post. The Constitution protects the right to report on the activities of democratically elected and appointed government officials. Any attempt to control messaging and curb access by the government is counter to the First Amendment and against the public interest. I just have to say I wholeheartedly agree with that. And I'm just a guy with a journalism minor. It gross. Stop it. And if they don't stop it, something has to be done. Something must be done. Something must be done. Rabble, rabble, rabble. Speaking of getting something done, guys, the U.S. Federal Trade Commission and 7 different states are suing Live Nation and Ticketmaster for tacitly allowing ticket brokers to scoop up millions of concert tickets and sell them to fans at a significant markup.
Tacitly? All right.
Hey. That's
I don't understand why they would do that. Like, it just seems like they're not getting the extra money. Are they getting the markup? Are they benefiting from this financially in some way? It just seems like such a bad PR move. And obviously it bit them in the ass, but I don't understand the reasoning behind allowing it. Is it too much infrastructure? It's too much work to combat it? Or what is it, Matt?
We've talked a bit in the past about this, right? I think at least one other time when there was a big lawsuit because of stuff going down and because of Ticketmaster's whole secondary market thing.
And our Ticketmaster episode, which dives deep into this. So, cui bono, to your question, Noel, part of the benefit comes from Ticketmaster's secret value proposition, which is we will play the bad guy to make you some more money. So you can blame us for egregious fees or our price fixing. And then you can also, look, with the secondary market, similar to that network of servers and SIM cards encircling the United Nations, there's an industry of scalping. It's quite organized, right? The days of the old guy who is selling tickets for extra weed at a Fish concert in the parking lot, those exist, but they're dwarfed by what's happening here. So you could say Ticketmaster makes a profit, makes a benefit by having a bunch of tickets pre-scalped, right? Essentially pre-scalped because of the way the bots and the automation can work. And then that means the only tickets that are available from that remaining pool, let's say the scalpers get all the general admission to continue, then the Ticketmaster guys know that the only things the average customer can buy are the more expensive ones, supply and demand kicks in, and so they raise the prices of those remaining tickets.
Especially because the scalpers is almost it's like a false demand that benefits them down the road or very quickly, in that they're able to then use that demand as a reason for raising the prices dynamically, especially with this new way they've been doing it that's been so unpopular.
Yeah, literally what I'm saying. We've got to throw to Dylan here, Tennessee pal. Dylan, what's the skinny? What's the scoop?
Oh, yeah, just reading an article about this. The FTC made the point that they've been triple dipping. So they've been collecting fees when the ticket is first sold. Then they collect a fee from both the reseller and the buyer of the resold ticket.
So, but my question, I guess, is it's not Ticketmaster that controls the secondary market. This is on stuff like StubHub or whatever.
Ticketmaster does have a resale market, though.
That's what I was wondering. So that's got to only be part of the portfolio here, because surely there would be something in place that wouldn't allow you to put it back on the Ticketmaster market jacked up to some absurd number. Or is that not the case?
Well, let's go back to you, Matt. What has changed with this recent news?
Nothing really has changed, just the big old suit. Ticketmaster and Live Nation reaped $3.7 billion in resale fees between 2019 and 2024. They control 80% of the primary ticketing markets for major concerts and venues. Just remember that. 80%. Here's a quote from Live Nation CEO Michael Rapino. He was talking to the CNBC and Boardroom Game Plan Conference. And this guy, by the way, CEO of Live Nation, is worth $997.1 million. Here's what he had to say. Music has been underappreciated. In sports, I joke it's like a badge of honor to spend $70,000 for a Knicks courtside seat. And they beat me up if we charge $800 for Beyonce.
No, I saw this. Yuck. Whoa.
But it's just very interesting. The concept that the guy, officially making the executive decisions for a company that allows us to go see our favorite artists, has that much money and thinks that little of us.
Right. I'd like to also, how much can a banana be, Michael? $10? I'd like to also shout out the even larger bands who have decided to eschew this racket or this conspiracy, like Pearl Jam. You know what I mean? You don't have to love Pearl Jam, but ethically, we can say they made a decision on behalf of their audience, their supporters and their fans, when they said, we're not going to mess with Ticketmaster, even though it might mean we are losing some money. So everybody check out our 2019 episode, The Ticketmaster Racket.
But the problem there too, and the problem with that whole merger of Live Nation and Ticketmaster is Live Nation owns all the venues, all the ones that are of a certain size that a certain tier of band could play. And I actually recently was really lucky to get a ticket to see Radiohead in Europe in December. In Copenhagen, and they had this whole thing where it was very fair. You had to sign up through Radiohead's website to get on a list to maybe get a code for a concert on this tour that you said you could attend. And then you maybe get that code or you don't. And if you do, you have to show up at a certain time, get in the queue, use the code, and then you buy the tickets at face value. And it wasn't egregiously priced at all, but there was a certain fairness to the whole proposition where if I hadn't gotten one, I wouldn't felt like the bots were to blame. I would have just felt like it was a crazy demand, but only certain bands of that size and demand and rarity, perhaps even of performing, can do stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Hopefully we'll have some Live Nation ads right after this, because this section is done. We'll be right back with more strange news.
And we've returned with our last segment of strange news. We already talked about Fat Bear Week. I'm going to just jump right in because we're running a little long today. Guys, do you think it's possible to get sued for talking smack about a virtual pop band?
I was really interested when you brought this story to us, Noel, because it's weird. It's a weird interrogation of the line between a personality or a corporation.
That's exactly right, Ben. And this is a story coming out of South Korea. An article by Ko Iway from BBC.com says a court in South Korea has ordered a social media user to pay 500,000 won, or around $360 American, for defaming a K-pop boy band whose members are virtual characters. There's a group called Plave, and I think the term is virtual idols. They're a K-pop group that are voiced and animated through mocap by real performers who remain anonymous. They are characters, sort of like Hatsune Miku is another great example of this. There are no real people behind those, I believe, because that is Vocaloid technology. That is this sort of voice synthesis thing. But there are individuals behind these characters, but nobody knows who they are. So last year, the agency behind this K-pop group, virtual K-pop group Plave, filed a civil suit against one social media user for talking smack, basically saying the band sucked and that the people behind the characters might be ugly. We'll get into the specifics in a minute. Plave debuted in 2023. They're one of the most successful stories of this whole virtual idol scenario. They have 1 million followers on YouTube, and they regularly post music and vlogs there. They have a song called Way No. 4 LUV, which was nominated for Best Vocal Performance and Song of the Year at the 2024 Mama Awards. And they also won a big prize at the Seoul Music Awards. So essentially what was said in these comments that were posted online, it was conjecture that the people behind the avatars, quote, could be ugly in real life and gave off, quote, typical Korean man vibe energy. That's according to the Korea Times. In the court case, the defendant claimed the comments were actually aimed at the characters, not the people behind them. However, the court didn't go for this argument at all, saying that if an avatar was widely recognized to represent someone real, even though they're completely anonymous, then attacks on the avatar extended to attacks on the real person. And Ben had to scoot for a thing, but he made a really good point earlier that this whole story is about narrowing that gap between what constitutes personhood, and like, what if I insult a cartoon? Does that mean I'm insulting the person that it was based on? And does that mean they could accuse me of defamation? I mean, it's wild. Like if I say something about Batman and there's a guy who plays Batman in a movie, is the association of that character with the cartoon version extend to that person? Of course, this is in a different country, but as we've talked about, Matt, in the previous segments of today's episode, this free speech stuff is getting a little dicey over here too. So they asked for 6.5 million won each per member, but the court, citing emotional distress that the comments may have caused. However, the court granted a fraction of this, 100,000 won per person, but the precedent is pretty clear. What do you think about this one, Matt? It's pretty wild.
It's just insane. It feels like life is becoming too complicated and strange.
To even like parse it out. Like it's wild. I don't know if I'm just kind of marble mouthed about this, Matt, because I see what you're pointing to, and it is such a bigger sense of confusion and information overload and meta-ness that I can't even put it into words.
Yeah, just that we're having to evaluate in courts the kind of things that we're evaluating in courts and figure out, is it okay for this? Is it bad for that? Is it right for this? And we're dealing with stuff that so often exists in virtual worlds and virtual representations. I don't know. It's so strange to me, man. I think maybe I'm just getting too old. I'm already too old for it.
There is that. And of course, like my kids' generation, and I think your kids, like one generation, yours is Gen Alpha, right?
I don't know. They're 10.
I think Gen Alpha then. Yeah,
sure.
For sure. And mine's Gen Z, and there is, of course, this, this generation raised on the internet that has absolutely done a number on certain brain functions, some for good, some for bad. We've talked about this. Like, there is a certain creativity and intuition and media savviness, I think, that comes along with that. But then there also, it does some other not so great stuff too. But you could say that about any generation and about any consumption of media, though with the exponential improvement and increase of media transmission and absolute quantity rather than quality of it, I'm with you, man. I don't want you to beat yourself up or say that it's about being old. I think this is true for everybody. Nobody can parse this stuff out, and that's why people start like making their own little bubbles and fiefdoms, because it is just so overwhelming.
Yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, but it's weird. We like bifurcate ourselves in that way.
Bifurcate our brains, our souls. Have you watched Alien Earth, Matt?
Not yet.
Well, there's some good. Some people are into it. Some people are not. I'm absolutely into it, but it has some interesting conversation of this bifurcation of soul and what can happen, when a soul and technology kind of intersect, and what even is a soul, and like what does that mean for corruption and the degradation of quote unquote the soul. I think it's a very, very interesting show, a little bit flawed in places, but I really like it a lot. And I think it's worth a look, and everything Noah Hawley does is pretty kick-ass. So we'll leave that one for now. Excited to chat more about this with Ben. So the last story I'm going to bring today, since we ran a little long, is we love a good history mystery. Don't we,
Yes.
Matt? We love a good monolith, don't we, Matt?
Oh,
exactly. I'm tumescent from the monolith. Researchers have apparently solved the mystery of some monoliths that I personally wasn't aware of in Armenia, known as, this is so cool, dude, the Dragon Stones. Something
sick.
called Zartonk Media, which rules, and I'm sure that's an Armenian word, but when I read it on paper, it makes me think of like a space lord or something. Reports that an international team of researchers have done comprehensive research into Armenia's Dragon Stones and believe they have found a link to an ancient cult. These are known as vishaps, after the Armenian word for dragon. They stand 18 feet tall, typically decorated with animal imagery depicting fish, and were erected in high altitude pastures, high places. We know all about those, right? Ley lines, high places, etc. Archaeologists, and I'm reading, by the way, from Archaeology Magazine directly here. This is a piece. Yes, again, I think this is a lift from that Zartonk Media piece. So I'm just going to read from here. Archaeologists have been unsure exactly when and why they were created. Led by Vahe Gurzadayan and Arsen Boboy Haiken, please forgive my pronunciations, of Yerevan State University, the team analyzed 115 known vishaps, and determined they were often located near springs, streams, and irrigation systems, which led them to conclude they must have been associated with ancient water cults and rituals that celebrated water as a life-sustaining force. They were often clustered at these high altitudes, around 62 to 8,800 feet above sea level, and that they were likely placed symbolically near sources of the snow melt that provided water for agriculture communities in the valleys below. Yeah, you can read the scholarly article about this in PJ Heritage Science.
Dude, doesn't it kind of remind you of the Nasarema thing that we talked about in listener mail?
Absolutely. Bro, that's the point, right? Like all of this stuff with enough separation from the actual culture and what it meant to those people, it all seems like anthropological craziness, things that you would study. We just got to kind of crawl out of our butts and realize that like we are the modern cavemen of whatever future, if it exists, is going to look back on and think how quaint everything we did was,
Yeah. Just talking about water cults. I think that term in particular is so interesting to me, like to label something a water cult.
But in the way it's being used here, obviously these are offerings or these are structures honoring certain gods or deities that they hoped would bestow favorable conditions, right, upon them to allow their crops to flourish or to allow them to have drinking water or whatever it might be. That's religion, man.
Yeah.
That's all it is. And it's even funny that they label them water cults here. It's, I think, because maybe they don't have a better name for it, or it's considered maybe more of a pagan sort of early sort of proto religion that's maybe not directly tied to one of the big ones that we think of today. That's why the term cult is so interesting, because it often just gets thrown around out of laziness.
Yeah. And I just, I'm so interested in this kind of stuff because you just imagine the significance of someone choosing to not only get this particular stone or one of these particular stones that are quite large and heavy, to carve it in such a way, to place it in the ground as some kind of marker. And then, all these years later, us trying to figure out the significance of it. I just wonder how many things like that we find are for some kind of very specific general purpose that has nothing to do with religion, has nothing to do with anything besides, hey, we're marking the levels of snowmelt in this general area, so we understand, or we're marking where to go so you can maybe see this.
Maybe there's
thing
a functional aspect to it, dude. That's a really good point, and it doesn't come up here in this research, but maybe there's like markers on it to show what I don't know. I think that's a really interesting way of looking at it. It's like Ben's always talking about how whatever future civilization discovers our civilization is going to be really curious as to why we worship these giant penises. Yeah.
If anything sticks around.
Yeah, well, 100%. Let's not be too doom and gloom about it. I do try to maintain a healthy sense of optimism, despite conditions. I'll just quickly wrap up with just a silly one that I thought was maybe it's not silly, it's assault. But in Surprise, Arizona, a man is facing multiple charges after he urinated in a movie theater during a screening of the latest Demon Slayer movie, which probably slaps. The last one was awesome. I actually remember seeing that with my kid when they were in their super anime weeb cosplay phase, and it's the only time I've ever been to one of those movies where the seats move and it squirts you with water and stuff. And may I just say, that is awful. Don't do it. It's awful. It's trying to it's like tracking sort of what's going on the screen, but it's really just jerking you around for an hour and 45 minutes, and it's very patently unpleasant. So don't do it. I will never forget that screening. But at least nobody peed on me, but the seat sprayed me a little bit. I mean, maybe this experience wasn't that different from mine.
On the Lonely Island podcast, Seth Meyers told a story a couple of weeks ago about he was going to see a movie. He's really excited to go see it. And he went and sat down and the trailers were playing and the seats were moving. And he just was like, nope.
I was with the kid and their friends. I did not peace out, but boy, did I want to. It was a chore, an absolute chore. There's actually a video of this though. And my buddy Jonesy over at the Weird AF News podcast, he was talking about this story. So shout out to him. Do check out his pod if you're looking for some other interesting weird news stuff, daily content. And how during the point where this happened, this guy pissing in the middle of the theater caused a stir, and essentially people tackled him, and there was a struggle of some sort, and apparently happened during a really epic battle scene in the movie. So if you watch the video, it's like this intense cinematic fight music, and you just see the silhouettes of this conflict sort of flashing across the screen.
Wow.
Did I mention this took place in Surprise, Arizona?
Surprise.
Yeah,
Arizona.
No joke, right? He was arrested, this dude, Lamil Hull, and booked on charges of indecent exposure, disorderly conduct, criminal damage, and to add insult to injury, refusing to provide a truthful name.
Oh,
that's another thing to unpack in and of itself, because has your algorithm started feeding you a lot of body cam videos or videos of people sort of like giving sass to cops? Because mine has. And a lot of times people will refuse to give a name, and they will maybe not give a false name, but they'll refuse to give a name. So is it only illegal if you give a fake name? Because it's definitely not illegal, to my understanding, to refuse to identify yourself.
Oh, that's a weird one to unpack.
That's what I mean.
That's another one of those where
it's all about decorum. It's about how far do they want to take it.
It depends on what, the officer you're interacting with officially is stopping you for, and if you are actually being detained, and whether or not you're aware of that. There's all these things, and if you're in the right as a citizen being detained in whatever way, you usually have to go to court to prove that you were in the right rather than just being right.
Oh, of course. And that's of course an expense and an inconvenience, and might not go your way.
Not to mention putting yourself in danger in that moment if you're being argumentative, which is crazy because
man, I mean,
asserting your rights is dangerous.
It's very interesting that I keep getting fed all these. Maybe it's because I linger on them a lot, and when I do, the algorithm thinks, and it is entertaining, and I am glad to see people sticking it to the man. And usually the videos that I see, do show the officer being in the wrong and the individual knowing their rights way more than the officer would hope that one would. So that there is something empowering about seeing those videos. But oftentimes the officer will still try to reach through the window and tase the person in the face, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. We did that episode recently on Taser International, right? We talked about a couple specific cases where it's a kid, like a 17-year-old that is just
with a heart condition, you know,
asserting that, hey, what's going on? Do you need, like, am I being detained? Am I being arrested? What's happening? Why? No, you don't have to do all that. What's happening? And then you're tased.
And that's the thing too, dude, where like all these court cases, we're really starting to see a test of like the speed of justice, where if so many of these things get challenged, then the system is just going to get so clogged up. And then after a certain point, it's almost like impossible to prosecute or to defend your position. And if it becomes just this matter of decorum shifting and all cops under certain instructions from the people over them who have people over them, it just starts to become militarized policing. I mean, we're already there. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to soapbox at all, but I just think we're not that far off from it literally just being like kind of like a willy-nilly cops can kind of do whatever they want to you without fear of repercussion world. I had a little silly story here. Not silly, again, gross. Hopefully nobody got splashed. And of course we ended it with talking about the impending doom of the police state. So, hey, that's fun at parties, as Ben would say. So that's it for me, man. I'm tapped out.
Well, that does it for this episode of Strange News. We hope you enjoyed. Maybe that's not the right term.
Parts of it were enjoyable.
Yeah. We had some fun while just reminiscing on the old times before things got so crazy and remembering that it's only going to get crazier, babe, but we're here. We're here. Well, thanks so much for listening to this episode of Strange News. If you're interested in contacting us to let us know what you think about any and all of this, you can do that. There are a myriad of ways.
There sure are, Matt. You can find us at the handle Conspiracy Stuff, where we exist on Facebook with our Facebook group. Here's where it gets crazy, on X, FKA, Twitter, and on YouTube, where we have videos for you to peruse and enjoy. On Instagram and TikTok, however, we're Conspiracy Stuff Show. Matt, I think there's a phone number, too.
There is a phone number. It is 1-833-STDWYTK. It's a voicemail system. You've got 3 minutes. Give yourself a cool nickname and let us know if we can use your name and message on the air. Please do give us a call. Find us on social media, and if you don't want to do those things, you can always send us a good old-fashioned email. We are
the entities that read each piece of correspondence we receive. Be well aware, yet unafraid. Sometimes the void writes back. We'd love to send you a random fact. We would love to send you some news about vicious squirrel attacks that have sent 2 victims to the emergency room. This is not a joke, says the flyer. More than 5 people have been attacked by a, quote, a very mean squirrel over the past few days. And that comes to us from San Rafael, California. Conspiracy at iHeartRadio.com.
Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.